Okay, I think he is on the way. Let me check one more thing. I did that. We're streaming. Okay. So yeah, I think Facebook is having a glitch because Cluster 3, which is the private group for this, I had just invited Leon like a couple of days or so before the conversation with you. Okay. And it worked, just the way it always works, and there was no problem. But then the day I tried to invite you, the invitation process, something was off about it. Okay. And that's why finally I just I sent you the email, which was they offered as another way, but now you're telling me that didn't work. So I think that they're just having a glitch going on with that function. And I'll give it a couple of days and try again.
Okay. Yeah. So these are a different group of people in this cluster, different from
Yeah. A much smaller group. A friend of mine named Rick co-hosted a couple of books with me, The Coming Plague.
Okay.
And Get the First 5,000 Years. Mm-hmm. And so Gio joined us on some of those discussions. And I don't know, maybe one or two other people, maybe Vanita. Mm-hmm. I think Vanita did The Coming Plague with us. So it's like maybe about 5 or 6 people that are in that group.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So where is he? He said he was at Cluster 3. Let me call him back.
Okay.
Or maybe what I should do is email him the link if he's.
Oh yeah, you should do that.
Karen, give us a minute. He's having a tech issue. No. All right, now we can hang up the phone.
Okay, all right. I knew today was going to be exciting.
Yeah, it's always a little challenge in the beginning. I was having tech problems myself, so so it's okay. But you're here now. Long time no see.
Okay. Yes.
All right, now we can hang up the phone. All right, now let me. Now I'm getting feedback because I'm still online. So let me close that. Yeah. I think we're ready. It's always a little challenge in the beginning. I was having wait a minute problems myself, so I'm still hearing my voice. Where's that coming from?
I can hear an echo.
Oh, it's okay, but you're here now. Long time no see. Yeah. Yeah. Where's that coming from? All right. Now let me. Now I'm getting online. So let me close that. Yeah. I think we're ready. Okay. This is weird. Still hearing my voice. Where's that coming from? I'm not sure what I need to do about this. Let me see. Yeah. Any ideas, Karen?
I'm not tech savvy.
Okay.
I was just wondering if you close out and come back. Maybe you have two windows open or something.
That's what it sounds like. It's two windows open.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to do a Control-Alt-Delete and see if I can. This is weird. See what processes are going on. I'm not sure what I need to do about this. Let me see. Yeah. Any ideas, Karen?
I'm not tech savvy.
Okay.
I was just wondering if you close out and come back.
Could one of us have two open? That's what it sounds like. It's two windows.
Oh, it's a good
point. I'm going to do a Control-Alt-Delete and see if I can. Yeah, that's possible, Leon.
Okay.
I'm not sure what I need to do about this. Yeah, because you were at the YouTube channel, Leon, right? So if you have YouTube open, see if you can close that.
Let me look around here.
I'm gonna do a Control-Alt-Delete and see if I can. Yeah, that's possible, Leon.
YouTube. Are we still together?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, sounds better now.
Yeah, it does.
It sounds better. Did you have YouTube open?
Yes, I had YouTube open. YouTube open.
Okay. Okay. Great. All right. So Leon knows me. I know Leon. Leon, this is Karen Johnson.
Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
And Karen, this is Leon Salter.
Right.
And Karen has been a part of a few of the book discussions that I've had under the Global Black Feminist Reading Circle and under Revolutionary Love Leadership Series. Karen and I did a one-day discussion on a book about Margaret Garner, who was an escaped slave, enslaved woman who killed her daughter rather than have her, when she was captured, rather than have her daughter raised in slavery. And Leon and I are old friends who haven't seen each other in a long time. And but we've known each other for a long time. And this is Leon's first book discussion with me. So, Leon, I'm calling you the co-host of this series on Begin Again, because it was really your idea to have a book discussion. So what I did, let me find my picture. Do I have it open? Yeah. Karen, I did this little picture. I'm going to share the screen because the other day, so Leon, so basically what the basic model for the book groups that I've hosted has been to have one person be the facilitator of each meeting. So we would rotate facilitators. And the facilitator's job was to write a summary of the chapter, develop a few questions, and lead the discussion. So that's usually what we do. But for the last couple of books or so, we've been going more freestyle, where no one has really been in charge of doing that stuff. And everyone has had responsibility for kind of identifying the passages they want to lead a discussion on. And, you know, and it's worked out pretty well. It's a lot less work that way. So I kind of like it. But last week I said, well, you know, I'm the only reason I'm always doing the welcome is because I'm just used to doing it. But when we share facilitators, doing the welcome is a part of the facilitator's job. So Karen, I did this picture. I did one for the Global Black Feminists, so that I don't have to always be the one doing the welcome, but I'll do it today since this is Leon's first time. So welcome everyone to Reading for Change, a collective journey. We're calling this cluster 3, meaning this is the third book that I'm having public discussions on under the Reading for Change name. Cluster 3 is meeting on Sundays at 12:30 between today and May 1st. And you can learn more about the whole book group series is called Reading Changes Lives. And so there's a website by that name, readingchangeslives.wordpress.com. You can also find the name Reading for Change, a collective journey on YouTube and Facebook. YouTube is where all of our previous videos are archived. Facebook is where we post event notices. And the book that we are reading right now is called Begin Again. Begin Again. What's it called? Begin Again. James Baldwin's America, and it's Urgent Lessons for Our Own, and it's by Eddie Glaude Jr. And so we're just getting started. Tonight is today, actually, is our first discussion, and we are going to focus on the introduction called Thinking with Jimmy. My name is Michelle Odom. I'm located in Brooklyn, New York. And the co-host for this series, who are you? Where are you?
And Blackwood, New Jersey.
And who are you?
Leon Salter.
Oh, nice to meet you, Leon Salter.
Pleasure's all mine.
And Karen.
Hi, I am Karen Johnson, and I'm located in Salt Lake City.
Oh, Jesus.
Ah,
Way out there.
yeah,
Good
definitely.
morning, Karen.
Good morning. Yeah, it's still morning time out here.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
So did everybody see the agenda? So I did, despite Leon and I saying we were not going to do, formal agendas for this book. Of course, I did one for today. But I don't know if I'm going to do it every week, Leon, even though I'm kind of almost there for next week. So.
I knew it was going to blow up.
I really can't help myself. But you got the agenda, Karen?
No, I did not. I'm not able to get in your, did you send it to me?
I didn't send it to you. Let me see if I have the link for it here. Yeah. But you got it, Leon?
No.
You didn't get it either?
No, you sent it to my email?
No. So, okay. So the let me put it in the chat. Where's the chat? Where is the chat room on this thing? Chat under more.
Next to participants.
Okay, I put it in the chat. No, where I posted. So okay, so there's a private group that's called Cluster 3. That's the one I had trouble getting Karen into. That the private group is where I post this link, the link to come into the studio and be a part of the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
There's a public page called Reading for Change, a collective journey on Facebook.
Okay.
Public page has an event section. All pages have an event section.
Okay.
On the public page and in the event for today is always where you can find the agenda, if there is one, the public link to the YouTube page for people that might want to watch our discussion on YouTube, and other miscellaneous items that I might post related to the chapter.
Okay.
But the agenda you should also be able to find in the private group, Leon and in Cluster 3.
Okay.
So anyway, so that's it. So what I will do, let me get my screens together over here. Since you guys are just getting the agenda, I will read the summary. And let me see. Let's share the screen. I can get to it. Come on, computer. 227. Okay. So what happens, Leon, is I always write way more questions than we can possibly get to.
I'm looking at it now, and okay, yeah.
And and it's just stuff to think about. So anyway, can everybody see my screen, or you have it open? Okay, so I'll read it. I'll read the summary. Not everything is lost. Responsibility cannot be lost. It can only be abdicated. If one refuses abdication, one begins again. And that's from James Baldwin. In the introduction, Thinking with Jimmy of Begin Again, James Baldwin's America and its urgent lessons for our own, Dr. Eddie S. Glaude Jr. provides his motivations for writing this book, which include a deep appreciation of works of Baldwin and the current state of race relations in the United States. Glaude avoided a deep reading of James Baldwin to escape the brutal truths of his life and works, which require much of us. Until he reached grad school, he preferred Ralph Ellison's writings instead, which allowed for a more comfortable experience when discussing material with white classmates. America's pattern of betraying Black people, seen after the Civil War and Reconstruction and the Black freedom struggle of the 1960s, and again after Obama's presidency, have led to disillusionment and rage for many. Baldwin felt it, as does Glaude, and managing that rage demands a certain set of skills. Glaude uses this book to examine how Baldwin harnessed his rage and lived his faith. Even after concluding he could no longer help white people save themselves from the insanity of racism, which the author sees as America's core problem. There's something there. In mining the nearly 7,000 pages of text Baldwin left behind, visiting the place the author called home for 17 years in Saint Paul de Vence, and grappling with his own demons, Glaude saw a relevant message in Baldwin's work, that the truth is the path to telling a new story about America, to begin again. So what I tend to do, Leon, when I write more questions than I know we can answer, I try to highlight the ones I want to start with. So why don't we start with number one, it looks like. Who wants to read number one?
I'll read it. Go ahead, Karen.
All right. Less than 2 hours after arriving in Heidelberg, I'm not sure how you pronounce it.
I think it's Heidel.
Oh, Heidel, okay. Glaude, I thought his name was pronounced Glaude.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've heard him pronounce it like that. Glaude and James were witnesses to a scene of police abuse. Police had a Black man's face pressed down on the concrete with a knee in his back. I didn't understand his pain words. I only knew the screaming was all too familiar. James turned beet red and for some reason felt the need to apologize to me.
So Karen, I think where it says 2 and 3, that's really supposed to be A and B. So if you could read that part.
Okay. Why do you think James apologized? And what do you see as the significance of the apology, if any? Glaude mentions the 2018 James W.C. Pennington Award as his reason for being in Germany. Pennington was born on Maryland's Eastern Shore in 1809, escaped slavery at the age of 18, learned to read and write, and was the first Black man to attend classes at Yale University. Do you think this is the Pennington honored in Trenton, New Jersey? Oh, did he mention Pennington and Trenton?
No, he talked about Pennington being from Maryland, but Leon and I are both kind of from Trenton, and that name is kind of prominent. I remember the first college that I went to was Trenton State College, and it was on Pennington Avenue. But what else is there? This seems like Pennington is all over the place in Trenton.
But it's a small town just north of Trenton, Pennington.
Okay.
Pennington, New Jersey.
Pennington,
okay.
New Jersey, yeah. Got a little small prep school, Pennington Prep.
There's a Black school or a white school?
It's a white school.
Okay. And well, that's interesting because my family, or my maternal grandfather, remember Michelle, I said that on my mother's side, we didn't really have quote unquote Southern roots, but my maternal grandfather roots is in New Jersey, is in Trenton, and they were one of the first Black families in Trenton, New Jersey, before it even was a city. It was just rural. And they had this,
wow.
There was 3 Black families, and my family was one, the Dunns. And so, and in fact, a cousin of mine told me that the land that Trenton State is on was the land that my grandfather's family owned.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have that.
There were a lot of Quakers in that Trenton, Princeton, Pennington, north of this, what is now known as Trenton. There were a lot of Quakers that resided in that area, and they were definitely against slavery and whatnot. Now, I'm not sure how much they were into integration.
And yet Calhoun, who is also prominently honored in Trenton, was a big old slave owner.
Right. Well, it was quite a few of them. He wasn't by himself, but it was quite a few. So that was somewhat of the dichotomy, at least in that area, in that time. I mean, you had right out racist bigots living next door and co-living with Quakers and abolitionists at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Is there a way for you to adjust your camera? Are you on a laptop or a
desktop?
PC? Okay. Well, whatever's happening right there is perfect.
Okay.
Prior to that, we were just getting your forehead.
Okay.
Which is a nice forehead and everything, but.
Right. I mean, you got to speak up.
Yeah. So I just, that was just something, that I thought about as I was reading Glaude talk about this Pennington history.
But back to the apology. Why do you, the apology was, I think, the crux of the question. And I'm not sure what he was apologizing for. Was it because of the situation? They had nothing to do with the situation.
Mm-hmm.
But why are you apologizing? And sometimes, I think I know I do it at times to myself, or if you see something and you feel sorry that a Black person is involved with it. And that might be outside of what James was talking about at that time. But that's the feeling I'm getting. It was like, okay.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think he was like embarrassed, on behalf of his race, white people. Look what white people are doing again.
Again. Here go again.
Right. You come all the way to Germany, and this is what you have to see.
Right. You got Biloxi right in front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then it also makes me think that that Black people have been subjected to a lot of police brutality in that country, in Germany. And then plus there have been a number of incidences in the US, particularly during that time frame in which Glaude is talking about in 2018, 17, 16, etc. And so this person, obviously, James, had a level of consciousness of racial violence that Blacks experience at the hands of the police. So it's probably at that level, because I remember even in 2016, it was so much in this country, police abuse, that I remember that one of the Caribbean islands actually put out a warning to their citizens saying that if you travel to the US, please be aware that you may be subjected to racial violence. And so the world is watching this is a so-called democratic society that is concerned about human rights, but the world sees the hypocrisy of that, sees the abuse that Black people are subjected to on a regular basis in this nation.
Right. I looked at it similar, but it was almost like the colonialism of racism by America. Wherever America went, either after a war, either straight out, colonialism going to take over a situation or a particular spot, racism was interjected. That was the thing. That was America. It's the top and there's a bottom. There's somebody that has to be preyed upon. And I think that might have been part of the apology of now here, racism has been injected into you guys through America, through 2 world wars. This is what we gave you at the end of that. It was racism, flat out racism.
And I think, and I agree with that too. We transporting that. But also we can't let the Europeans off the hook. Their racism in which they created, particularly during the 500 years ago with the transatlantic slave trade and colonization. So it is the reality that happens in Europe as well against the formerly colonized Africans and Caribbean, etc.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so obviously James had a level of consciousness about these and he's not colorblind to it. He has a level of consciousness that Black people are subjected to this.
Right. And I think he had a understanding that the person who was brutalized didn't have to do anything.
Right.
It's just, this happens.
Right.
And I think that was part of the apology, because here again, this person could have been just walking in that space and somebody decided to brutalize them. And in that case, it was the state. The police represent the state. So here you go. Why are you here? They just came out of 2 world wars, and now, basically this person of African descent is being approached similarly to which the Jews were. Where are your papers at? Why are you here?
Right.
And that's 100% America. It's still, as we speak, it still goes on today.
Right.
Pull you over, and hey, you gotta identify yourself. For the most simplest things or common things, just to be in a space, just to drive, to walk, to show up, to want a coffee or just want to be respected, you go through that whole identify yourself, tell me who you are, and I'll let you know if you should be here or not.
Right.
Living while Black.
Yeah.
Leon, would you look at question 9? Would you read that one, please? And while you're reading that, I'm going to step away for 1 minute. I will be right back.
Okay. Both the Civil War and Reconstruction and the Black freedom struggle of the 1960s grappled with the central contradiction at the heart of the Union, and Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King, respectively, rose to the moment. Some may want to take issue with my reduction of our current malice to the problem of race. The willingness of so many of our fellows to toss aside any semblance of commitment to democracy, to embrace cruel and hateful policies, exposes the idea of America as an outright lie.
You want to read the A, B, and C?
Okay. How might you describe the central contradiction at the heart of the Union? Do you see America as an outright lie? Whom do you see, if anyone, as effectively carrying on the work of Black freedom? How do images, democracy will fare as the browning of America increase? Do you imagine the US will become the latest apartheid regime or do you think we're more like the flourish and multicultural democracy? Okay, we can get started, Karen. Okay. How might you describe the central contradiction at the heart of the Union? The Union being the United States, you think?
Right. Particularly, yeah. Well, we weren't the United States because we didn't have all of the states.
Yeah.
But the states that were fighting during the Civil War. And so one of the contradictions is being a nation that supposedly is supposed to be all men are free, right?
Right.
Men, right?
Created equal.
Right.
All men are created equal.
Yeah. Created equal, right? And
all men are created
equal. Is the contradiction of a nation writing a constitution that articulates that, but excludes enslaved people. Okay, obviously enslaved people were not considered human beings, right?
Right.
And then also a nation that writes a document that excludes women.
Right.
And so
that was always the big in my, now their woman, the white woman, was kind of pushed out. It was just, and it wasn't poor people, it wasn't poor whites. It was just landowners. That's who they were talking about. Landowners, right. People who had means.
Right.
So all men are created equal was a lie right off the top. It right. wasn't far from it.
Right.
Right. Nowhere did they think all men were created equal. And that was always, you know, when I looked at that and when you kind of analyze, you kind of say, well, wait a minute. This woman just bared your children. She's taking care of you. And this is the white woman. And she was just as far out at that point as anyone else who was on the outside. Couldn't vote. And then lots of times, if the husband died, the inheritance always didn't go to the woman. It kind of moved around. They had ways to push her out. Because, you know, land and money is control. So, if he died, why leave her in control? Because she doesn't count. Uncle, a brother or somebody else steps in and takes over.
Exactly.
Well, let Karen finish her point.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, I appreciate what you were saying. That was true. And so, I'm picking up what you said. Also, is if the married woman, if she's the one that had to inherit wealth from her dad, for example, that automatically went to her husband.
Went to her husband, didn't go to her.
Right. And so patriarchy go hand in hand with a developing capitalist nation, a nation that developed into a capitalist nation due to enslaved people, enslaved African people. And so those are the contradictions that we develop into a capitalist nation based on the blood, sweat, and tears and human degradation of African people. So how can we have a document? And that's what I liked. I don't know if you all ever read David Walker's Appeal, but I love it because he does in that appeal, you know, David, you familiar with David Walker?
Yes.
Okay. And so David Walker, just real quick for your audience. So David Walker was born free because his mother was free and his father was enslaved. So you inherit the condition of your mom. And so, but he, during the 1700s, during the time of the American Revolution, where this nation was talking about, oh, we want to be free and talking about breaking off from Britain, what David Walker did as an activist and abolitionist was wrote what he called the David Walker's Appeal. And in that appeal, he went step by step and different steps and themes where he spoke about the Constitution and showed how this nation, which is supposed to be a Christian nation and a nation that's supposed to be founded on democracy, was filled with contradictions. And so he used those themes to not only to argue against and provide a counter argument to this nation and talk back, but also provide a way of re-articulating what freedom should look like and what freedom should look like from those who are oppressed, because those who are oppressed understand and see what freedom look like unlike the oppressor. And so that's the contradiction in this nation. And we continue to live, we continue to articulate this contradiction, even with what is going on in Russia and Ukraine, okay? We need to really understand how capitalism and imperialism works with what is going on in Ukraine and how NATO march hand in hand with building a power force that is about white power structure worldwide, okay? And so when we talk about so-called democracy, I'm getting started now. When we talk about democracy, but yet we can't even apologize for the enslavement of Africans. We can't even talk about reparations for those who are descendants of the enslaved or those who have been subjected to the Jim Crow laws, but yet we could go over it. We have to unpack that hegemony. We have to unpack those contradictions, those lies, peel back the lies and see what is really going on to this nation. And unfortunately, a lot of us buy into that. A lot of us are not critiquing the doctrines of this nation because it is filled with hypocrisy. So I don't need to get on a...
No, it's fine. But Leon should know we are joined today, Leon, by Dr. Karen A. Johnson. Karen, what's your doctorate in?
Education.
Okay. So...
We respect the title, Doc. We will respect the title.
Yeah, and Karen and I are in another book group together where we're reading a fiction called The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. And so I think both of us are a little bit starved for just some real life factual information, which is what we're getting from Dr. Glaude's book. And so that's why Karen is so stimulated. So I think I'll pick up on the part E. Do you imagine the U.S. will become the latest apartheid regime, or do you think we're more likely to flourish as a multiracial democracy? Well, I do want to say I'm glad to see the Ukrainian people fighting back at this attack on democracy. And I would hope that Americans would have that kind of resolve. But I do think we have a particular opportunity to observe what is going on between Russia and Ukraine from the perspective of how easily that kind of thing could happen right here on this soil. And, you know, I don't know if he was just playing a game or, you know, a strategy, but when the Ukrainian president Zelensky, you know, the US apparently saw this coming for weeks in advance, but Zelensky was busy saying, you know, the Russians are just playing. You know, it's never going to happen. And so that kind of denial, that's why I say I don't know if it was a strategy, but it seems like a poor strategy to me, because it seems like you're not really giving your people a chance to do what they need to do to get themselves ready to either fight or flee. So we've seen this move toward autocracy going on here in this country, but I think a lot of people still don't really take it seriously. So I think we should pay attention. I think we should pay attention to how quickly Ukraine falls, if it falls, how the people respond to this attack on their soil, what options are available to them, what countries open their loving arms to their refugees, you know, and all of that kind of stuff, because I think we need to get our own heads ready for that kind of an attack.
You're saying an attack from the outside? Somebody will attack you?
Well, could be outside, could be inside. I mean, we got a bunch of crazy, right-wingers running around on the inside, but their goal ultimately is to destroy democracy.
Right, yes.
You know, and install some kind of madness.
Right, yeah. I think that's more of the way things might happen here in the United States, opposed to an outside person coming in and taking over with a big army. Then it just turns into
like Mexico. Mexico is not threatening us. Right. You know, Canada is not threatening us.
But
we got people on the inside.
Yeah, right. We've got enough idiots inside, and a part of the structure inside that's where we would run into problems. You see what's going on with voting in regards to making it difficult for certain people to vote. And the wealth gap, that just keeps getting wider and wider. And then when you put people in a bad situation, they'll do what you want them to do just so they can have some means to survive. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're going to at this point, you know. Most of the jobs are gone, and it's not that these good paying jobs, quote unquote, are coming back or somehow are just dormant here in the United States. They left years ago. Ago and willingly left. If you wanted cheap dollar goods stores, product, you had to send this out of the United States. You couldn't have union labor making $1 whatever. So it went out to Japan, Vietnam, China, our boys over in China, all these places where it was cheap labor. And that's what we got stuck with. And I definitely think it might not be a lot of bullets flying, but there's going to be a change in the power structure here in the United States. And, you know, certain groups are playing the long ball or the long game in regards to that, setting up things now from very basic things, school boards, taking over the school boards, making sure we indoctrinate the kids and their parents with a certain thought. America never had, in my opinion, America never had history. It had propaganda. I mean, from the beginning, what we thought of the Indians came from John Wayne, not the truth. What we thought of Black people came from Amos and Andy, you know, the Jack Benny show with Roscoe, and just bits and pieces that this is what goes on. And so, yeah, I think we're going to have, something's going to change drastically here in the United States. And to constantly quote, me and Karen was mentioning the Constitution, I think they're going to pretty much say it don't count. You know, that's a document that don't count anymore. You hear people, oh, I'm a constitutionist. As soon as it's going to be a document that doesn't count anymore. Things has changed. You know, they didn't know what was going on 200 years ago. Things have changed now.
Yeah.
Karen, anything?
Yeah. Read that question again. You said D.
Are we gonna be the next apartheid regime in this change that's a coming?
Oh yeah. So this thing has been going on for decades in terms of marching towards an assault on some progress that were made during the 60s. Is all really has been this backlash. In Ibram Kendi's book, Stand from the Beginning, one of the things that he talks about, that he brings up, he said that when you look at the history of this country, you'll see time frames in which there was progress, but whenever there was progress, it was always backlash to that progress. And so that's what we definitely seeing that. And we've been seeing that since the 80s with Reagan and his on Reaganomics and whatever, his policies, et cetera, and this move towards another kind of way of taking back the gains that had been made during the 60s and 70s. And so that's where I see we are. And that electing a vice president who's Black, electing a president who is Black, or Black women on the Supreme Court, none of that changes the structure of this nation.
Right.
It does not change white supremacy. It does not change institutionalized forms of racism. It does not change patriarchy or classism or put an end to capitalism. It does not do that. Those power structures stay in place. With regards to us looking like a so-called democracy, that's the game. That's the hegemony, to have us be blinded to follow the party line, when in the party line is always about supporting white supremacy, upholding white supremacy and capitalism and imperialism overseas. While people are saying, let's pray for Ukraine, were we talking about that when this was going on a year and a half ago in Ethiopia? Are people aware that the US on Friday was bombing Somalia? That there are troops on the continent of Africa, US troops engaging in all kinds of warfare? And so we buy in, a lot of people buy into the hegemony.
Well, that doesn't hit the 24-hour news cycle.
It doesn't hit the 24-hour
news cycle.
But we are indoctrinated. We are still a lot of us are being indoctrinated and thinking that change and progress is being made with regards to the nominating of Black women to the Supreme Court. That don't mean nothing to me.
Nothing.
I want my people to get an apology and their not 40 acres in a million.
Reparations.
But
reparations, some kind of dollar amount.
You know what I'm saying? So that's what I want, true transformation. But that is not going to happen in a nation that is determined to hold on to white supremacy and white power structure. and capitalism.
Most definitely, most definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'm gonna have to pull out my rose-colored glasses with you two.
Go ahead, say, pull out your glasses, kid. Do you think?
No, I want to find something optimistic to feel hopeful about, but it's hard. It's really hard. But if I were going to try to hang some hope onto something, I suppose it would be that the demographics are in fact changing. America is in fact getting browner. But Karen is absolutely right that none of that changes the fundamental structures that are in place. And I would say, in addition to that, the way that Black Americans have been acculturated to American culture, to the values, the individualism, the way we have learned how to treat each other to survive in this country. We have not really broken those bad habits. And so even as America becomes browner, I'm not sure that we have the will left to want to be good to each other, to want to break the systems that have oppressed us. I think we just want to take the place of the oppressor.
Right.
And
but Michelle, during slavery, America was browner. There was more Blacks, like the state of South Carolina, there were more Blacks than whites. So just being browner, it doesn't really change the outcome for the folks on the ground, for us. I just think at this point, the structuralized racism in education, in our forming of laws, how we treat each other, that is which really kind of, we have to relearn everything that was learned in order to say, now share the pie with me, because at this point, if it was given to us, it will be given back in a short matter of time, because we don't, as you said earlier, how we treat each other is somewhat the biggest hurdle to get over. And I don't see, I don't see all white folks getting along, and I'm not expecting all Black people to get along, but we have to understand this overreaching system that we grew up in and we were raised under for decades, for generations, has formed everything. It's formed our thinking, how we
treat.
So we have to, somewhere, somehow, I always think of that each one teach one. And I don't know what that gets us, but that's my solace, and say things will get better if I knew somebody else was teaching one other person, and hopefully that person teaches one other person and it just goes down the line. But yeah, I don't see apartheid because that's so in your face, but I definitely see what we have. I call it Jim Crow on steroids. It might not be N-words don't come in here, don't do this, but it's Jim Crow on steroids, man. That's what I see. And it'll just be more of it. The wealth gap gets bigger. And there will be Jay-Z. There'll be Supreme Court justice. There'll be maybe another Black president. Major cities have Black mayors, but that does nothing for someone growing up in Trenton, some young Black boy or girl growing up in Trenton under that system from cradle to high school graduation, if you can consider that a viable piece of paper to say, well, look, I graduated from high school.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever they got, it's definitely detrimental to them being an equal participant in society with whites. Just the way I see it.
Right, yeah. Well, one thing about Baldwin that I appreciate is that he always held on to hope. So he did. And so, because we had to hold on to hope,
yes,
because hope allows us to envision a better world. And it helped us, it could be our guide in terms of how we should engage in a struggle that would truly make this nation a truly equitable and socially just nation. So it is hope. And I think that we also need to look at struggles that we have engaged in, so, you know, even though that they were for reforms, but what were the successes that came out of that? And what were the lessons we could learn so that we can move forward to continuing to engage in these struggles? And there are groups that are out there protesting. The mainstream media or the white stream media, corporate media, do not allow us to see this. So we have to find alternative progressive media outlets to see that there are people who are critiquing, for example, who are critiquing racism, the criminal justice system, and also providing guidance in terms of how do we need to struggle. Like this whole idea about abolitionists, abolishing the police department. These are a kind of, well, what are you all talking about and what would that look like? But it's offering a different alternative vision of how to be in the society. There are people out there now who are critiquing what is going on in Ukraine and Russia with regards to the US, the EU, and NATO, and the problematics of them, and how this provoked what is happening now. And so I think those groups give us hope in terms of helping us understand truly what is going on and should we engage in a struggle that gives rise to truly a democratic society. I hope I'm around. I don't know. I know it's a protracted struggle. I don't know if I'll be living, but I need to hold on to hope, because sometimes I do get very pessimistic, but I think about people like James Baldwin. I think about people like Cornel West, who also, I know a lot of people attack him, but he speaks truth. I feel that he speaks truth to power in terms of how he critiqued this nation. And one thing about him, he always have a vision of hope. And so those are the kind of people I need to continue to read and listen to in order to hold on to that hope, in order to find ways to engage and struggle that will make change.
Didn't Eddie, I read a little ahead, I'm in the chapter 1, but Eddie talked about the huddle up that Baldwin had at Howard in the 60s, like around 63, 64, somewhere around that. And later on in his life, in Baldwin's life, here he was very optimistic about what was happening on the HBCU campuses and whatnot, especially Howard, for his example. And later on, when he was a little older and I think he was sick, some of the optimism, what I was thinking, the twinkle in his eye had somewhat left. Not saying it was completely gone.
It did. But what you're doing is like telling somebody the ending of a movie. we try, even though I read ahead usually because I want to be able to write a summary to set up the invitation. But we try to keep the conversation focused in the chapter that we're on so that everybody can be on the same page.
Right, so that's one demerit for me.
Well, it's not a demerit, but I'm just saying you and I we started this earlier than Karen did. I only told Karen about this a couple of days ago. So she was reading to catch up to be where we are.
Okay.
So even though she's probably read ahead too, but I'm just saying in general.
Okay.
But I think
right.
what he alludes to when I was reading the introduction, it seemed like he was alluding to the fact that Baldwin had lost hope, even when he was standing in Baldwin's house in France.
Yeah.
That he was doing a metaphor between what was going on in his house and how, towards the end of his life, Baldwin.
He called it the ruins. He called it the ruins. Mm-hmm.
Right, the ruins. And so, and I think also when you get, like for me, when I was young, I had so much optimism because I, like when I was young and going to college, there were a lot of nations from the continent. Well, not a lot, a number of them were fighting and being free of colonialism, right? Mm-hmm. Mozambique, Angola. And so I was reading this literature. I was just so hyped and saw a better future for the continent. Envision myself, I'm going to live on the continent of Africa in these nations that have thrown off the chains of colonialism, and was articulating a freedom that was totally different, right, than what I was living here in the US, etc. Now that I'm a senior citizen, I'm like, okay, I know I'm not going to the continent. It's been, you know, the presidents and he colonized by China, and now the US is all in there bombing different nations. And so then that, you know, so I feel a lot of pessimism. I don't have that optimism and idealism that I had when I was a young woman, right? But I think that even as, you know, as moving towards being a senior citizen and you don't see real change, that contribute. And I think that that's probably what happened to Baldwin. Then you just, you know, you don't hold on to hope anymore. You're not optimistic.
Yeah. You know, I Karen, one of the things is it our responsibility to find our own links of hope? You know, you said something earlier that it's out there. The mainstream media or the white stream media doesn't always inform us. So is it our responsibility or is it their responsibility? I take the conclusion that it's our responsibility, you know, because you get, from what we see, if you watch mainstream media, you're going to get a different opinion of what's going on in America with Black people.
Right.
And if you kind of dig in, I've got a local radio station, WHUR here. It's Black-owned talk station in Philadelphia. So when you listen to that, I mean, you can pick the same story, go to HUR, hear it, and go to ABC, hear it. It's going to be two different spins on that one story.
Right.
So
right.
I
want to read question 8 before I get into the conversation you two are having now. Donald Trump's presidency unleashed forces howling beneath our politics since the tumult of the 1960s. For decades, politicians stoked and exploited white resentment. Corporations consolidated their hold on government and cut American workers off at the knees. Ideas of the public good were reduced to an unrelenting pursuit of self-interest. A moral reckoning is upon us, and we have to decide once and for all whether or not we will truly be a multiracial democracy. Question A, what differences did we see in what was happening in the world in the 1980s as people who pursued both an MBA and MPA? And B, if profit is the only value worth pursuing, what is sacrificed from your personal perspective? And so Leon and I, are about the same age. He's older.
Thank you.
and so we were in school around the same time. has an MBA and I have an MPA. And so we always were like looking at the world, I think, through two very different lenses. And so, you know, I think that as we go through this book, you'll actually see some of those differences come out, except, I don't know, I haven't been around Leon in a long time, so maybe he's a different person.
Or
but
yourself.
But I would say, you know, I would say that Glaude's summary there, or how do you say it, Glaude? Glaude?
I think he says Glaude. I think I heard
Glaude, like cloud. I think it's, you know, a good summary of what I saw happening in the 80s and 90s. But I think for me, part of my interest in pursuing an MPA, even though clearly MBAs were more popular and more marketable even at that time, was that I could see what Glaude is going to describe later in the next chapter as the after times. I could see that's the moment that we were in, that from the moment Ronald Reagan came into office, you know, we were clearly in a retrenchment phase from all of the progress of the 1960s. So I felt like it was our responsibility as Black people to be trying to figure out how to hold on to the gains we had made, you know, and how to push it to the next level. And I felt like, I still feel like there are a lot of great ideas. There are a lot of wonderful visions about where we should go as a community. And I feel like there are a lot of people who want to set themselves up as the leader of getting us there. But I don't feel like there are a lot of people following. And I don't feel like there are a lot of people actually with the managerial skills to know how to take an idea and implement it, bring it into reality. And that is some of the skill that I believe you get from both the MPA and the MBA. So when I think about the difficulty of the challenges before us, and Karen's heard me talk about this many times, I have this idea in my head of a 500-year plan. Because, Leon, what I think white people are exceedingly good at is taking the long view. They know where they plan to be 500 years from now. We don't know. We don't know. And, you know, it's hard to wrap your head around a 5-year plan, much less a 500-year plan, because we know we won't be alive to see it out. But what I'm really just saying with that is if we don't start to take the long view of what we need to do with our children today, so that they will be someplace in 20 years, so that they will have an idea of, okay, what's the next step? Because when you're trying to implement an idea, see, the difference to me between the MBA and the MPA, the goal of getting profit is one goal. You know, you've got to sell widgets. Either you sell the widgets or you don't. Either you make the money or you don't. But when you're dealing with human beings, when you're dealing with social problems and political problems, those are very intricate, complex, unpredictable situations. A lot going on. And from a management perspective, all you can really do is grab a hold of one piece of it and say, well, this is what I'm going to focus on this year.
Right.
You know, maybe next year we'll deal with the drug problem. Maybe the year after that, we'll deal with the mental health problem. You know, you can't do it all at once because we don't have that kind of energy and resource. So when I am being hopeful, it is hope that in enough generations, because to me, we're just repeating a lot of the same stuff. And so we've got to break that cycle. But I'm hopeful that in enough generations, we can. I don't know if we will, but I think we can.
You know, I think you're right in regards to having a long view on things. And there was some difference in presentation and style from the 2 degrees, as you alluded to earlier. Now, one of the things that wasn't brought up, at least not in my mind enough, was that the biggest and the most important resource you have is the people. Without the people, you got nothing. You know, profits are one thing, but the people what sustain you, the people is actually the organization. That's what happens. I think there was a few talking heads out there 30 years ago, and it's talked about profits. Everybody remembers that statement, you know, greed is good, out of Wall Street. And that's just not how it should work. And for our conversation, I'm now of the mindset that we have to look at developing the people and selling the long game. Pretty much, this is for you to have a 20-year position, or for you to do this for 20 years, and then you got to pass it on. You have to develop a team approach now. Here again, that was part of our propaganda machine 40, 50 years ago, when you had to buy from America. So it was, you know, profit was everything, because the world had been torn apart. And so you had to buy from America. You couldn't get a Toyota at the end of the Second World War because Japan was blown up. So at this point, we have to start from wherever we're at and putting together understanding that this is for the long haul. This is not necessarily for right now, but we're digging in to create a base that will be here generations down the line. And that has to be the one linking thought through everything. Do everything at once, but certain things are going to lead. I mean, when you talk about the mental health problem, the drug problem, basically the health problem, you know, asthma and things of that nature, all those things are intertwined. We have to deal with them together and separately at the same time and look at how can we move this along. But I think still in all, going back to that ugly thing that nobody wants to talk about, racism and slavery, you know, we weren't told to get together. It was held against us. You know, if you sell to Michelle, I'm not going to buy from you. So it's important that we now start saying, hey, it's important that we work together. We work together on small projects. You can't build a country from what we have right now because we've been separated for such a long period of time. And then we go there, you know, for example, there's brilliant people out there, you know, Colin Powell went through his thing, and just so many brilliant Black men and women out there that could run the country, but the underpinning is not there. So that other group of people are going to be constantly breaking it down, breaking you down and bringing you down. So you have to start saying, hey, let's start a little smaller. Let's start and be focused on it. And, you know, you're not going to get everybody to agree. I can't believe there's any group of people that everybody agrees on one thing. I mean, there's obviously white people that did not agree with slavery, just didn't agree with it.
That's what allows me to be hopeful, as I am most of the time, that I do think, you know, you just have to understand you can't eat the whole pie in one bite.
Yeah, you can't do it in one sitting. Yeah. And I just think it's just now when we sit down with our children, grandchildren, anyone, it's talk about the long haul. You know, you're going to get your education. You're going to raise your children with these type of morals, this type of understanding, and you're doing it for generations, opposed to get yours and hold on to it. That gets you nothing. And I think that's where we're at now. I think we have to really, and there's just no way to erase what has happened. So basically, we're saying that we know it's going to be better, but we might not see it. When you took a lot of the preachers out of, and I'm talking about the sincere guys who were talking about, I'll see you in the by and by. They were saying, well, it might not be done when I get out of here, but I'm setting you on a course to get it done. So, and then we went from that to prosperity, and it was get yours and don't worry about nobody else. Just hit me up with my tithes. So
it is just about 2:00, and we had said we were going to do this for an hour. And of course, we were a few minutes late starting. So, Karen, do you want to give us some closing words?
Well, I guess 2 words. Audre Lorde says that you can't use the master's tools to dismantle the master house. But at the same time, I think that we still need to hold on to hope, because we have to, like you two said, we have to take in consideration our next generation.
Oh, most definitely. That's great. That's great.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, me too. And so thank you, everyone. We will see you next week reading our story together.
Okay.
Right.
Ladies, you've been a pleasure.
Leon, I'm not going to hold you for an after video call.
I'll catch up with you.
Oh, okay. I got work to do for 2.
See you later.
All right.
See you later.